Chapter 22 to 28. One of the reasons Raditz had stayed over and sparred with Piccolo was because he was interested in Piccolo's special beam cannon. After having tempered his spirit, Raditz's mind was clearer, his sense sharper and his ki control had vastly increased, and he felt the Kamehameha was too normal and only contained a large concentration of energy and had a strong impetus. While Piccolo's special beam cannon had a stronger penetrative force and was more useful in breaking the defense when fought against someone stronger. Although Raditz had tempered his spirit by quite a lot, it simply gave him a better foundation to meditate in order to increase his ki. Tempering the spirit did not increase his ki, but a strong spirit was required in order to meditate and increase his ki volume. Meditation could be done in many ways, and each way had different effects and uses. It could be used to do image training. It was similar to doing shadow boxing. But by doing image training, one did not need to move one's body at all. It was also possible to link up mentally with someone else and do mental combat with their full power instead of holding back and sparring in the real world. There are no negative effects of dying in mental combat and is a great way to fight without holding back. Meditation could also be done to calm one's emotions and get rid of distracting thoughts before a battle. It could also be used in order to inspect the inside of one's body and find hidden injuries. Although ki does not exactly have a healing effect, a large amount of non-destructive ki applied to a certain part of the body does speed up the body's natural healing for that area. Thus, one can get rid of old and hidden injuries this way. There are many ways to meditate in order to increase ki. One way is to eat well and stay healthy so that each cell of one's body will generate as much cell energy as possible. Then, by meditating, one can compress their ki and have it cycle through the whole body, drawing in the cell energy in each and every cell in one's body to feed their ki and propagate their ki. Large amounts of non-destructive ki have a positive effect on one's body, so by letting the compressed ki cycle through one's body, it will also increase the cell energy generation in one's body. It's also one of the reasons why Saiyans improve their ki levels so fast. They have strong physiques and have naturally talented bodies that are fit to train one's body, especially through gravity training. In fact, if one's body is strong enough, even without doing any meditation, one's body will generate enough cell energy that it will automatically transform into ki. Another way to increase ki is to rotate one's ki to compress and create a ki vortex with a strong suction force that will absorb the spiritual energy generated by one's spirit. The spiritual energy will then be assimilated into the ki vortex and increase the ki volume. But this method required the ki vortex to be very stable in order to compress the intangible spiritual energy and not let it disperse. The bottom of the ki vortex will compress the intangible spiritual energy and feed it to the ki, which will then digest the spiritual energy and grow bigger. Piccolo's meditation was to cycle through his ki throughout every part of his body and then rotate it in the center of his body to create a ki vortex. Although it was more complex and harder to cycle his ki this way, he would in return increase his ki much faster. Raditz had shamelessly copied Piccolo's decade worth of self-improved ki meditation technique and made it his primary ki meditation technique. But because of his Saiyan physique, he was less inclined to start meditating to increase his ki, when I still had much space for improving his body and generate more cell energy. Of course, Piccolo's meditation technique was very complex and required great ki control. It also trained one's ki control even further the more one trained in this ki meditation technique, because one could infinitely compress their ki more and more, but at the same time, it requires more ki control to compress the vast amount of ki while still keeping to cycle through one's body. Far away in space, in a large disc-shaped spaceship. That Raditz you reported dead is actually still alive. Frieza sat on his throne and said. Nappa and Vegeta were on their knees, paying their respect to Frieza. What? How can that be? Nappa was shocked. That bastard. He tricked us. Vegeta said angrily. Oh, an interesting fact. Is that Raditz's battle power is 620,000. Frieza looked at Vegeta and Nappa's expression in interest. Impossible. How can Raditz be that strong? Him. That weak radish boy. How is it possible? Vegeta could not accept that a mere mid-class warrior could possibly surpass him, a super elite class warrior. Not to mention, had surpassed by far more than simply a little. Even after years of fighting, Vegeta's battle power was approaching 20,000. Lord Frieza, we must punish that traitor. Vegeta said sinisterly. He could not allow another Saiyan to surpass his strength. He planned to borrow Frieza's power to kill Raditz. Nappa opened his mouth, but no words came out. He had a conflicted expression. Ever since he found out that Frieza had exterminated his race, he no longer held any good feelings for Frieza. In fact, after hearing that Raditz's battle power had reached 620,000. He was indeed shocked, but also pleasantly surprised. Maybe they had a shot at getting revenge for their race. Although Raditz had defected, considering that they were serving Frieza, and having been teammates for years, Nappa could still accept Raditz's actions. But being loyal to the Saiyan Prince, he had mixed feelings about Vegeta's attitude. After reviewing the report, Vegeta believed the Saiyan kid to not be Raditz's child, but instead Kakarot's. After all, it hadn't been long since Raditz defected. There was no way he could have gotten a kid 4 to 5 years old that fast. That means among the 3 men traveling with Raditz, except for the Namekian, the last man had to be Kakarot. We don't know where that traitor is, but since they went to Planet Yardrat, we should send some scouts and look for clues to their whereabouts. Maybe we can find where they went or if they have stayed in Planet Yardrat. Dodoria suggested. No, there's no need. It's impossible for him to leave any clues. We simply need to launch a slow attack at Planet Namek. Since Raditz's new group has a Namekian, I'm sure that Namekian cannot ignore his own people dying. Even if Raditz does not come, that Namekian is sure to come to Planet Namek. Once we capture him, we simply need to get that Namekian to spit out Raditz's location. Vegeta proposed his plan. He did not believe they would go back to Earth after leaving that planet. And being cold-blooded himself, he did not believe Kakarot nor Raditz would give a damn about the Earthlings. My! Vegeta, what a good plan. We'll go with that. Frieza smiled. He also wanted to get rid of Raditz, the abnormal Saiyan which had surpassed the limit of Saions. Maybe Raditz would one day become a Super Saiyan which Frieza was wary of. Naturally, he would be more than happy to nip the buds before they bloom. Piccolo had been interested in his own race after hearing the Jinyu Force calling him a Namekian. Raditz told what he knew about the Namekians and his home planet, Planet Namek for Piccolo. Piccolo was shocked, but after recovering he was interested in visiting his home planet. They had spaceships and also learned instant transmission. There was no reason for them not to visit Planet Namek. The duo agreed to visit Planet Namek sometime in the future. After all, they had just came back from Planet Yardrat. Raditz remembered his promise to Bulma to bring her along next time they traveled to somewhere safe. Raditz had gone to visit Dr. Brief to see if he had improved the gravity chamber to beyond 300x gravity. Raditz had fully digested the energy contained in the fruit of Tree of Might. Although he had not had much of an increase in his battle power because he had spent last year tempering his spirit and learning spirit control techniques. But he planned to seriously train his body now and eat more fruits of Tree of Might. He believed 200x gravity was his limit for now, but not for long. If Dr. Brief had not improved the gravity chamber yet, it was a good time for him to begin. Other than that, Raditz also wanted to borrow the Dragon Radar. It's been more than a year since Krillin and Gohan had wished for the forest to be restored. Just as Raditz got his hands on the Dragon Radar, the sky suddenly darkened and lighting struck a certain place. F***CK. Who's using my Dragon Balls? Raditz rapidly flew high up into the sky and saw a tiny green snake-looking figure appear in the distance with numerous lightning striking in its surrounding. Raditz sensed plenty of ki around Shinron, and also one whose ki was much bigger. He quickly locked onto that ki and teleported over. Shinron. I wish for eternal you dash, a hooded man raised his arms and yelled out. But just as he was about to finish his sentence, Raditz appeared next to him and gave him a hard kick, sending him flying into a small hill which then exploded into many stone fragments. Like hell you are. Raditz cursed. He had waited for so long, yet another fool was trying to steal his wish for another year. Who are you? A soldier asked. All the alien soldiers around wore alien armored suits with helms covering their faces. A few soldiers even had wings growing on their backs. Shinron, I wish for eternal youth and a forever healthy body so I'll never get sick. Raditz ignored the dumbfounded soldiers and neither did he answer their questions. Although he had many wishes he could choose between, he did not have time to ponder on other wishes when there were so many soldiers who could jump the gun and steal his wish. Raditz had purposefully asked for a forever healthy body because he knew Goku would contract a heart disease, and he was worried it was genetic. Although he had wanted to wish for Goku to also have a forever healthy body, he did not want to end up reciting a wish too long only for one of the many soldiers here to steal his wish. But it was still a few years until then, and Raditz had plenty of time to wish Goku a healthy body. That is simple. Shenron's red eyes shone brightly for a moment. Your wish has been granted. Farewell. Shinran said before he turned into yellow light and split into 7 golden balls which flew away each in their own direction. Ah! Damn bastard! How dare you steal Lord Slug's wish? The soldiers had just understood the situation and started surrounding Raditz. Capture him! The soldiers jumped on Raditz. I feel slightly more energetic, but that's all. I guess I'm still in my prime. Raditz muttered as he inspected his body that barely had any change. Bastard! You'll regret stealing my wish. The hooded man had crawled out from the pile of rocks and stones of the former hill. Lord Slug. The soldiers' morale grew upon seeing Lord Slug return. Slug. Ah, that's right, after Tul's comes Slug. For him to come around this time is reasonable since he needs to use the Dragon Balls to regain his youth. Raditz muttered. This was due to Gohan and Krillin having used the Dragon Balls last year. As such, it was only reasonable for Slug to come around this time when the Dragon Balls had already reset. Lord Slug is a Super Namekian, which had great potential and battle power no less than a Super Saiyan. Although much training and effort are required to reach such a level. Raditz had no idea if Lord Slug had reached the level of a normal Super Saiyan, which is to say about 150 million in battle power. But he was incredibly lucky to have stopped Lord Slug from wishing back his youth. Having lived for 500 years, Lord Slug was close to dying from old age, his body was incredibly fragile and had none of his powers from his prime. That was why a simple kick from Raditz had caused him to cough blood and gotten even weaker. Maybe because Lord Slug was so angry that he lost his mind. Because he was so close to regaining his youth, only to have it stolen from him, that he did not run away from Raditz. Lucky. Raditz had a smile upon seeing the situation. Raditz sure did not want to meet a boss when level 1. Although he was stronger than a so-called level 1, it still would not feel good to fight someone that might have around 150 million battle power. Although whistling at a certain frequency was Lord Slug's Achilles heel, Raditz had never tried it before and would rather not place his life onto luck. Raditz shot out numerous ki blasts at Lord Slug's soldiers. The thunderous explosions swallowed over half of the soldiers. When the dust settled, there were little blood on the battlefield, most of the blood had been vaporized by the ki blast's explosions. What remained were numerous body parts and pieces scattered around. Protect Lord Slug. The soldiers stayed loyal and formed a defensive formation around Lord Slug and tried to bring him back to their spaceship. The reason all his soldiers were loyal was simple, they were all birthed by him. Only now did Lord Slug recover, he quickly moved with his loyal soldiers toward his spaceship in fear. Raditz simply smiled and sent a few more ki blasts as a farewell gift. Thunderous roars swallowed up the terrain and took the soldier's life. Finally, only Lord Slug was left. No! Don't kill me. We don't have any grudges. Lord Slug raised his hand in surrender. He didn't even know why he was so unlucky to suddenly meet a stranger that he had never ever met before wanted him dead. No, we don't. But you're too evil to remain alive. Raditz did not accept Lord Slug's surrender. Rather than keeping a ticking bomb, he preferred them dead. Aiming his palm at Lord Slug, a fist-sized ki ball appeared. With a light push, the ki ball expanded into a human size and swallowed up Lord Slug completely. There was no explosion nor thunderous roars. Once the ki ball disappeared, Lord Slug had been reduced into dust that fell down into a small pile where he had stood. It's a pity. Raditz shook his head. Lord Slug was a Super Namekian, if he wasn't completely evil, Raditz would have been interested in forcing him to fuse with Piccolo. Of course, Piccolo would be the base. But he was afraid the pure evil would badly affect Piccolo and decided not to let Lord Slug fuse with Piccolo. Raditz heaved a sigh in relief. A huge ordeal had turned into a tiny problem nipped in the bud. Alright, time to train hard. Raditz was motivated to become strong, so he no longer needs to fear his future enemies. To be honest, ever since Frieza noticed him, Raditz had started to feel an urgency to get stronger. Frieza's gaze was like a Damocles sword hanging above his head. To Frieza, Raditz was just a bug that he could squeeze to death. If Frieza really came to look for him, he would not even have the strength to resist him. Raditz ate the last 4 ripe fruits of Tree of Might, gaining an additional 200,000 battle power. Seeing that he still had room for more, he ate 10 unripe ones and gained another 50,000 battle power. Although Raditz had spent most of his time tempering his spirit. Tempering his spirit was also an important part of martial arts training which Raditz had neglected in the past. Now that he had tempered his spirit, his martial art foundation was finally complete. Tempering his spirit did not increase Raditz's power by much, but it did greatly reinforce his foundation so that his future training would bring him greater gains. With the addition of the fruits of Tree of Might, his battle power had finally reached 1 million. Only 40 unripe fruits left. It's time I planted the seed of Tree of Might. Raditz really could not stop eating these delicious fruits that were like legal doping. Raditz had spent a week sparring with Piccolo and learned his special beam cannon. Though he had learned it, he still needed more practice to use it in battle. Unlike the Kamehameha that was simple to imitate after seeing it once, it was important to have a high level of ki control to compress the ki and spin it like a drill. Once its spiral path deviates, it will quickly lose its penetrative force and be no better than a normal ki beam, if not worse, by having its energy dispersed to its sides before it reaches its target. The fundamental part of the skill was the charging stage, which is to concentrate ki into rope shapes and spin it in a perfect spiral. The longer one charges, the more ki was compressed and needed to perfectly spin it in a perfect spiral path, which in return required even higher ki control. It was normal to charge the special beam cannon as much as possible to increase its destructive force. But who will give you the time to stay defenseless and charge your ultimate attack? It was imperative for Raditz to practice and practice until he could charge the skill to an acceptable level before it was viable in battle. Raditz was amazed by the enormous ki level emitted by his special beam cannon once he had charged it to the limit of what his ki control allowed. Of course, it required a very long time to do such a charging. It was no wonder Goku only used Kamehameha. Once their ki level was at such a high level, it would naturally turn even harder to control such a big volume of ki. Raditz admired Piccolo for using such a complex technique, especially when he became a Super Namekian. With such a huge volume of ki, he was still able to perfectly perform the special beam cannon. In ki control, Piccolo was certainly a genius through and through. Raditz decided to fly around in space and find a suitable place to plant the Tree of Might. He did not know how long he would be traveling, but he was going to train seriously while on the spaceship and decided to restock his senzu beans. Raditz teleported over to Korin Tower and really appreciated such a convenient skill once again. Raditz took 12 senzu beans, bringing his stock of senzu beans up to 15. Although there were 7 more senzu beans, Raditz decided to leave some for Goku and the others in case of an emergency. Last time when they had fought Trolls while Raditz was traveling in space. Because Raditz had taken all the senzu beans prior to his trip, Goku had almost died if Raditz had not made it back to Earth on time. Be sure to keep up the output, don't lower it. But you can increase the output if you want. Raditz said. Ah. Do you want to work me to death, meow? Korin said angrily and knocked his staff on the floor. Raditz quickly said goodbye and flew away. After finding a big clearing, he threw out his spaceship capsule and flew out to space. Alright. Let's aim for Super Saiyan. Raditz raised his arms and pumped his fists at the sky. After he set up the spaceship's flight path to fly outward in a spiral path with Earth in the center. Raditz configured the gravity simulation machine to 200x gravity and started training his body. Ugh! I thought 200x gravity would be a piece of cake. Turns out it was just my ki increasing. Raditz muttered as he felt the enormous pressure from 200x gravity acting on his entire body, like a pair of giant hands pressing down on him. Although it was possible for him to use his large ki to counteract the gravity, it wouldn't help him train his body and simply waste his training. Raditz let this ki converge inside his body without letting it out to alleviate the pressure his body felt, but he did let the ki cycle around his body and seep into his cells to reinvigorate his body and quicken his body's recovery rate. Since he had plenty of senzu beans to spare, Raditz was not afraid of pushing his body too hard. After getting used to 200x gravity, although it would be unbearable for him to keep staying in 200x gravity for longer periods, he could now move more naturally for at least a short moment. While training hard, Raditz did not forget to occasionally inspect the planets he passed by. Although his spaceship had passed numerous planets already, the Tree of Might required a high amount of nutrition to mature and bear fruits. A planet rich in life force yet devoid of living people was difficult to find. 2 months had passed since Raditz left Earth. The spaceship landed on a brown dwarf planet. I miss Piccolo. It was so convenient to bring a clothes materializer around. A topless and sweaty Raditz disembarked from his spaceship. He couldn't be bothered to put on a new set of clothes while his pants were still quite intact. Raditz sent out some ki to wrap around his body and vibrated the ki in high frequency in a few short bursts. All the sweat was shaken off by the vibration and fell to the brown ground. Hee, I didn't expect myself to be able to use such a convenient technique. Raditz smirked. He had vaguely remembered seeing something similar from maybe a movie or TV series he had seen before his transmigration. Unfortunately, his memories before the transmigration remained blurry and unclear. But he was still able to imitate it and achieve a similar result to his satisfaction. Raditz crouched down and grabbed a handful of the brown mud-like substance from the ground. Ahem. This looks fertile. Raditz muttered after smelling and feeling the substance. Raditz flew around the whole planet and nodded his head. This place is, as of now, the best I've found. If I can't find a better place, I'll just plant the tree of might here. Raditz went back to his spaceship and saved the coordinates. This was the third planet that Raditz had saved its coordinates. Just as he was about to launch his spaceship, a small-sized spaceship flew toward this brown dwarf planet. Ha ha ha. This guy looks quite rich. A high-pitched voice sounded from the small spaceship. Yeah. I've decided, this is our target. Another voice echoed. The small spaceship landed and two aliens with dinosaur-like heads stepped out and looked arrogantly at Raditz's spaceship. Hey! Step out of our spaceship, now. The skinny alien pointed his gun at Raditz's spaceship. Some stupid space pirates. Raditz frowned and opened the hatch. Saiyan. The two aliens just happened to see Raditz's brown-furred monkey tail and jumped up in fright and hugged each other. Seems like the Saiyan race is quite notorious. Raditz had a wry smile. To think even some small space pirates would react like that once they saw a Saiyan. Gee, great Saiyan, it was a mistake. We'll immediately leave. The other alien quickly bowed and begged with his two palms clapped together. Scram! Don't let me see you again. After sensing their weak key, which could at most be a few hundred battle power, Raditz lost interest in these stupid space pirates that did not even have a scouter. Though the scouters were developed by Frieza Force and might be exclusive to them. But Raditz couldn't imagine such weak space pirates being so arrogant while they're unable to identify nor measure their target's battle power. If I was them, I would most likely pretend to be a traveler and befriend my target so as to extract all kinds of information from them. Raditz pondered, then shook his head. No, why the heck am I even thinking about this? Oh, great Saiyan. We'll scram now. We'll immediately scram. The two space pirates hurriedly scrambled back to their spaceship and flew away as fast as they could. Raditz had spent 4 months in space, both in training and finding a suitable planet to plant the Tree of Might. Because he had flown around in a circular path with Earth in the center, even though he had traveled for 4 months, he had actually not traveled too far away from Earth. It's a pity, I guess I'll go back to the brown planet. Raditz muttered. He had found 5 planets suitable over the 4 months he had traveled in space. But only the brown planet was most fertile and richest in nutrition and was most suitable to plant the Tree of Might. Raditz had used up 4 senzu beans, and in return had managed to get used to 300x gravity. He was now able to move about almost as if he was on Earth. Raditz was very muscular and strong, his bones very dense and sturdy, coupled with his tall height, weighed slightly over 120 kilograms. With 300x gravity, he would have to bear his body weight that was over 36 tons every single moment. And that was simply from doing nothing and just standing still. But if Raditz were to move around intensively and jump around, the force he had to bear would be many times more. Raditz might have gone a little overboard. He left the gravity simulation machine on 300x almost 24/7. Even when he sleeps. The only time he had to shut down the gravity was when he needs to relieve himself in the toilet or to eat a meal. Raditz had originally wanted to keep the gravity on completely after he got used to 300x gravity, but even though he got used to the gravity, it wasn't that simple to eat, or to pee. With 300x gravity. Raditz had learned his lesson. He didn't even want to remember what had happened a few hours earlier. So, with nothing better to do, we spent a week in key meditation while in 300x gravity while the spaceship flew to the brown dwarf planet. Unfortunately, I can't pinpoint the planet without a key to lock on. Raditz shook his head in disappointment. If there was a key for him to lock onto, he could have easily teleported over. At least the distance to the brown dwarf planet was relatively short to only need him a week to travel. Raditz's scouter had a reading limit of 2 million battle power, had broken after Raditz tried to read his new battle power. Unfortunately, Bulma had forgotten to give him her newly improved scouter during New Year's celebration. Or maybe she did not expect Raditz to immediately leave after the celebration. Raditz landed on the brown dwarf planet and dug a small hole for the seed of Tree of Might. After putting the seed in the hole, he covered the hole. The Tree of Might sure is magical. Once it was planted, it had already sprouted. A small tree sapling grew at a visible speed. But it was growing about a millimeter per second. As expected, for a planet to not contain any living beings, no matter how fertile the soil is, it can't beat a big planet flourishing with life. Raditz compared its growth with when it was planted on Earth. Although it's growing at a visible speed, but compared to on Earth where it grew by leaps and bounds, it was indeed a very slow growth. Raditz shook his head and hoped it would bear some fruits soon. He packed up his spaceship by turning it into a capsule and put it away. It would be impossible for him to teleport to a place devoid of life. But Earth was filled with living beings. Since he wasn't too far away, as long as he focused well, it was easy for him to sense their ki on Earth. He did notice that after tempering his spirit, his ki senses has improved vastly as well. Now he was more sensitive to ki and could sense ki further away. After locking onto Cammy's ki, Raditz teleported to the lookout. After greeting Cammy and having him repair his clothes, Raditz waved goodbye and flew to Capsule Corporation. He was eager to find out just how high his current battle power was. And he was also eager to get the improved gravity chamber that can increase the gravity beyond 300x. The body is the vessel for ki. There is a balance between the body strength and ki. When there is a very large discrepancy between them, they will slowly balance themselves out. When their body strength vastly surpasses their ki level, their body will slowly generate more ki to reach a certain equilibrium. Likewise, if their ki vastly surpasses their body strength, the ki will nourish their body and in time raise their body strength. But due to his Saiyan physique, his body would adapt at a much faster rate, considering that he was well versed in martial arts. After ki meditating for a while, Raditz's battle power had improved by leaps and bounds. After reaching Bulma's house, he had immediately urged Bulma for her new scouter. Wow! It's actually 3 million. It increased by 3-fold. Raditz was pleasantly surprised. Of course, due to his eagerness to find out his battle power, once he released all his ki, Bulma's room collapsed. Damn you Saiyans are so barbaric. An angry Bulma with a bandage wrapped around her head cursed Raditz. Luckily, the capsule corp was so big and expansive. Bulma's room alone was the size of a house. Even though Bulma's room collapsed, the casualty was only a few maid droids and a slightly scratched Bulma. Because there was only one person to save, Raditz readily grabbed Bulma and shielded her from the collapsing ceiling debris. Unfortunately, Bulma had her head knocked by fist-sized debris, which was the reason for her outburst. Or so Raditz believed. It won't happen again. Raditz pleaded with his palms pressed together. He was afraid Bulma would stop him invent things for him. Humph. I almost got buried alive. My own room almost became my grave. Bulma was really angry. Raditz had tried and tried, but was unable to calm her down. How about this, I've planned to go to planet Namek soon. Why don't I bring you with me? Raditz pulled out his trump card. For real? Well, I guess I'll forgive you this time. Bulma jumped in joy, but soon noticed her actions, coughed slightly and acted as if she was doing Raditz a favor. Raditz couldn't understand why Bulma got so angry. When she adventured with Goku when they were younger, she had run through fire and guns. Why was she so angry at him? Bulma quickly ran away in glee. Maybe she was looking forward to traveling in space in a spaceship. Seeing that everything was resolved, Raditz went to see Dr. Brief. After a quick chat, Raditz switched his old spaceship capsule for a new one and also got a new gravity chamber capsule. Raditz was elated. The new gravity chamber's maximum gravity was 400x. Though, unfortunately, it was difficult for Dr. Brief to increase the gravity any further. Due to the materials on Earth not being sturdy enough, any high gravity would wreck the whole gravity chamber. Until Raditz was able to provide better materials to construct the gravity chamber, the 400x gravity was the limit. I do know Frieza Force has all kinds of resources and researches going on. But it's not like I can raid their bases now, can I? No, I can. I freaking can. With instant transmission, as long as I prepare a target to teleport beforehand. Raditz clapped his hands and muttered. But I can't go too far. If Frieza goes crazy and destroyed Earth. Raditz had a wry smile. He could only run away from Frieza. There was no way he would want to confront him, a big boss. I'm also interested in their rejuvenation tanks. A few hours to a whole day's healing is able to heal any wounds as long as they are alive. It's like a cheaper version of Senzu Bean. Raditz muttered with desire. Forget that for now, I should do it when I get used to 400x gravity and have nothing more to do. Raditz shook off his distracting thoughts. Raditz took a few days of well-deserved rest. He had trained hard for over 4 months and enjoyed the relaxing days on Earth. Since he had nothing to do on his rest days, he brought Gohan and Goku to relax with him. Although Raditz invited Piccolo as well, he declined as he was intent on continuing his persistent training. "Wow, Gohan, you really have changed a lot." Raditz praised Gohan. Even without sparring with Gohan, Raditz could feel the great change in his ki and aura. Yes, Uncle Piccolo is very strict but also caring. Unlike Dad, Piccolo knows how to be harsh and push me to my limits. Ehe. Dad is always so soft, but I can't blame him either. Gohan said with a smile, like always he was happy to get praised. Gohan had felt the huge difference between Goku and Piccolo's teaching. Being as hardworking as he is, he was rather happy to train under Piccolo. Raditz was taught how to fish with his tail. Both Raditz and Gohan stood at the bank of the river with their tails waving slowly in the water. Once they felt a stir in the water, they retracted their tails and behind them, a giant fish jumped out of the water chasing their tails. Ah! That reminds me of my childhood. I used to fish with my tail too. Too bad Kami had it removed. Goku reminisced and said in a laid-back manner. A time machine with the Capsule Corp logo on its engine suddenly appeared in the northern wastelands. A purple-haired youth disembarked and surveyed his surroundings. "I hope I can change the past and save my world," Trunks muttered. "That's weird. I'm pretty sure Frieza should be coming over by now." A confused Trunks flew up in the skies and scouted the area for any signs of battle. "I can't find any debris of Frieza's spaceship either. It's as if he never appeared on Earth." Trunks had circled around the whole northern wastelands a few times already and got more confounded the more he scouted the area. "I wonder if Goku will still land in the same spot." Trunks looked doubtfully the coordinates shown on his watch. Still, with no better options, Trunks flew over to the coordinates that Goku had landed on Earth from his timeline. "It's been over 4 hours. According to Mom, he should have landed here over an hour ago," Trunks said with a wry smile. Unfortunately, even after waiting for over 4 hours, Goku did not land there. Because he was born late, he did not recognize any of the ki around on Earth. "What do I do? The past is nothing like what Mom told me. Could it be that the past has already diverged? But how? It shouldn't be. I just arrived," Trunks said in disbelief. "Let's go to Goku's home. Gohan should be there," Trunks decided and took to the skies. Because Trunks had suppressed his ki, no one noticed his arrival on their timeline. Above the skies in Mtapauzu, tiny shockwaves exploded and stirred the air. Raditz and Gohan were sparring high up in the skies, so as not to destroy the surface area of Mtapauzu. Especially since they lived there. Even though they were not fighting with all they had and had suppressed their ki, they still caused a small stir high up in the skies. With each clash, a tiny shockwave spread out and tiny explosions could be heard in the skies. How is this possible? Even though Gohan isn't going all out, with my experience I would say his battle power is enormous already. Maybe 300,000 or 400,000. It could even be more, considering Gohan's potential. Without extreme anger, it's difficult for him to dig out all his powers. Raditz was shocked. He had thought he had worked hard by reaching 3 million battle power. But Gohan was already catching up. Maybe because Raditz was behind in training by a year since he was only focused on tempering his spirit and the few spirit control techniques he had set his eyes on while he stayed in Planet Yardrat. Gohan hadn't reached the threshold to learn instant transmission, but he couldn't have only tempered his spirit for a whole year in Planet Yardrat. Raditz did remember giving Gohan the advice to also train his body in the gravity chamber. I did know Gohan has incredible potential since he was able to transform into a Super Saiyan 2 not long after he learned to transform into a Super Saiyan in Cell Saga. Raditz thought. How did I do, Uncle Raditz? Gohan asked with eager eyes as if saying, please praise me. Very good. You're catching up to me soon. Raditz smiled and ruffled Gohan's hair. Ha ha ha. Gohan laughed happily. They descended and landed back on the ground. But what waited for them was a grumpy Bulma standing next to her hovercar. Raditz. When are we going to space? Bulma walked out of the hovercar with her cheeks puffed. Come on, it's only been over a week since I came back from space. Raditz complained. What? When did you go to space? Why didn't you bring me? I want to go too. I want to go. Bulma threw a tantrum. Then why don't you just go by yourself? You got plenty of spare spaceships at home? Raditz asked. Are you crazy? There are tons of bad guys on Earth already. I bet there are even more bad guys in space. Bulma complained. Just then, Raditz felt like he sensed something and turned to look at the skies. A tiny black dot was rapidly enlarging and soon turned into a young man with purple hair. Ah. That's future Trunks. I did remember it was around age 764, August he came. Too bad there was no exact date, so I had wondered whether this timeline was the main timeline or an alternative timeline created by future Trunks from his time travel. But now I know. Raditz had a slight smile. How interesting it is for Raditz to be in an alternative timeline, but it was the main timeline of the storyline that appeared on the anime. That means Cell is already here. How fun. Raditz had a smile on his face upon thinking of Cell. He unconsciously turned to look at Gohan. Bulma wasn't able to make sense of the tiny dot far in the distance, but Gohan stared seriously at the dot as it enlarged. Who is he? I've never sensed his ki before. His ki is weak, but I have the feeling he is really strong. Gohan looked serious. What? Is it an enemy? Don't tell me the Saiyans have finally come. Bulma started getting worried. Future Trunks lightly landed on his feet in front of Raditz and the rest. Gohan raised his arms and prepared himself for battle. Bulma was worried that Trunks was a Saiyan and hid behind Raditz's back. Hello. Trunks looked awkwardly at the group that did not look very welcoming to him. Phew. He doesn't have a tail. Bulma wiped away the sweat on her forehead and heaved a sigh in relief. Though he is not a Saiyan, he's quite close to being one as a half Saiyan. Raditz joked in his mind. Hello. Who are you looking for, mister? Upon seeing that Trunks was friendly and meant no harm, Gohan reverted back to the cute and lovely kid again. Ah. Yes. Yes. I'm looking for Mr. Son Goku. Do you know where he is? Trunks had been looking at Raditz in a daze. Just who is that Saiyan? Mom told me the only Saiyans on Earth were my dad, Mr. Son Goku, and Gohan. Trunks thought in his mind upon seeing Raditz's brown-furred monkey tail. It actually wasn't so simple for him to identify a Saiyan, considering that all Saiyans had had their tails cut off from his timeline. So Trunks was even more confounded to see both Gohan and Raditz have their tails intact. Oh, my dad. He's home. What's your name, mister? Gohan looked curiously at Trunks. Huh, your jacket got our Capsule Corp logo. Are you perhaps one of our employees? After Bulma relaxed, she got curious, and especially after seeing the handsome Trunks, she couldn't help but scrutinize him closer. No, I'm not. I'm sorry, but I can't tell you. Trunks said apologetically. It's not like you'll be born, considering Vegeta never came to Earth. Raditz lampooned in his mind. Even if he stayed mysterious to hide his identity, it was unknown whether Bulma will be able to have a Trunks when she still had never met Vegeta in this timeline. You can't even tell us anything. Bulma was disgruntled by Trunks' attitude. I'm sorry, I can't tell you my name, but I can tell you my age. I'm 17. But I would like to speak to Mr. Son Goku, it's important. Trunks said apologetically. I don't think he's a bad person. Come, I'll bring you to my dad. Gohan said and lead the group back to his home. While they were walking back to Goku's home, Raditz kept looking eagerly at Trunks. I know he's a Super Saiyan already. I was going to try and test if I can get the hang of Super Saiyan on my own. But this is even better. If I can have Trunks help me. Raditz thought happily. Is there something on my face? Trunks felt uncomfortable from Raditz's intense stare. Oh. I just feel like you smell like us. Raditz said in a teasing manner. He especially emphasized the us. Trunks were so shocked he stopped in his tracks. What? Mister, you're also a Saiyan. Gohan's eyes widened and looked curiously at Trunks. Saiyan? Oh no. The Saiyans have finally come to invade Earth. Bulma yelped in shock and hid behind Raditz. What? Trunks had a dumb look on his face. He could not understand what was going on. How could Bulma be so shocked and even think the Saiyans had invaded Earth just because of his appearance? Just what has happened to change the past's history by so much? Trunks were truly shocked and confounded. But it was difficult for him to ask for more information from the group, considering that he was not telling them anything about himself. Why yes, I'm a Saiyan, but I'm not here to invade Earth. Trunks said awkwardly. He didn't dare to say he was a half Saiyan in case he let the cat out of the bag and let someone accidentally guess his identity, which might erase his existence if he doesn't get born. Maybe because future Trunks did not kill Frieza and save Earth, his actions of hiding his identity made them more suspicious of him. Luckily Raditz knew him well and mediated a bit until the group reached Goku's home. Goku. All you do is play around and disturb Gohan's studies. You don't even have a job. Is this how you should act as a role model for Gohan? If it wasn't for father leaving us with a large wealth, we wouldn't even be able to live in a house anymore. Chi-Chi's loud reprimands could be heard even at the front door with the door closed. Mom! I'm back! Gohan, looking embarrassed, hurriedly shouted. Oh, Gohan is back. Goku. Remember, don't disrupt Gohan's studies. He needs to study from noon to evening. Chi-Chi lowered her voice, but everyone could still hear her. Damn, she's really ruining Gohan. Raditz's lips twitched. Gohan. Dear, are you hungry? Don't play too hard. You need to stay energetic so you can study more, but don't let your playing affect your studies. Chi-Chi looked at Gohan in concern. She even raised his arms and checked every part of his body to make sure he was fine. I'm fine, Mom. Gohan said helplessly. Oh, brother-in-law. Bulma. And we have another guest. Chi-Chi only noticed the others now after making sure Gohan was alright. Goku, this mysterious young man is looking for you. Oh, by the way, he's also a Saiyan. Bulma said. A Saiyan? Goku looked curiously at Trunks. Maybe because Raditz was fine with him being there, Goku did not link him with the evil Saiyans like Nappa and Vegeta. You're Mr. Son Goku? Trunks asked Goku to reconfirm because he had never met Goku before in his timeline. Yeah. Goku nodded. Good. I need to talk with you alone, can you come with me? Trunks asked. Sure. Goku followed Trunks to a fair distance away from his home. Mr. Goku, can you tell me everything of importance that has happened since age 762 until now? Trunks was just too confused with the current past's history after seeing Goku was still on Earth instead of having just returned back to Earth. He was also confused that Frieza did not show up. Sure. Goku in his laid-back manner started telling everything that had happened, from when he first met Raditz, to his training at King Kai, to their space travel to planet Yardrat and fighting the Jinyu Force. What? Father, no, Vegeta never came to Earth. What about planet Namek? Trunks was shocked by how different the past's history was from his time in the future. Planet Namek? No, we've not been there. But Piccolo wants to visit his home planet, so we plan to go to planet Namek later. Goku said. Then you've never met Frieza? Trunks asked, still in shock. Frieza? No, although I want to fight him since he is so strong. But Big Brother said he is the strongest in the universe and even he doesn't dare to fight him. Goku said with some desire. Oh no. How can this be? If so, everyone must be really weak right now. How will they cope with the androids in 3 years? Mr. Goku might not even be able to transform into a Super Saiyan either without having fought Frieza. Trunks held his head and muttered in disbelief. He didn't even know what to do. He was also worried that Vegeta might never meet Bulma, so he might get erased if they don't give birth to him. Raditz, Gohan, Bulma, and Chi-Chi looked at Trunks and Goku chatting and turned speechless from seeing Trunks' panicking state. I think I know what's going on in his mind. Raditz thought while looking at Trunks' performance in amusement. Are you okay? Are you feeling unwell? Goku asked, yet never suspected the actual reason for Trunks to be in such a panic. The truth is that I'm from the future. But somehow, the past's history has changed by a lot. Trunks started explaining from his identity to their current state in the future to his reason for traveling back in time to bring hope. I can't believe you're actually Vegeta's son. But Vegeta and Nappa still haven't come to Earth, will he really meet Bulma? Goku looked curiously at Bulma and wondered how she would get together with Vegeta. But I can't believe I actually killed my own big brother in your time's history. Goku then turned to look at Raditz. Oh, man. I died from heart disease. I really want to fight those androids though. Goku clenched his fist and said in disappointment. The androids are even stronger than me after I transform into a Super Saiyan. Aren't you afraid of them? Trunks asked in wonder, especially after knowing that Goku could not transform into a Super Saiyan. I sure am afraid, but the thought of challenging such strong people excites me more. I wonder if I can defeat them if I start training now. Goku looked eagerly forward to meeting the androids in the future. They continued talking, and Goku promised to keep Trunks' identity a secret. Then Trunks gave him the medicine to cure the heart disease Goku would contract in the future. Trunks hesitated for a while. He had originally planned to only give the medicine and warn Goku about the androids in 3 years' time. His mother had told him the reason they fell into such a ruined state was that Goku, who had always protected Earth time and time again, had contracted a heart disease and died. But now he was worried whether they would be able to defeat the androids even after training for 3 years. What he worried the most was them not being able to learn about how to transform into a Super Saiyan. Because Goku had by chance managed to transform into a Super Saiyan during his fight with Frieza, he was able to pass on his experiences to the others. But in this timeline, they still had not achieved Super Saiyan transformation, which worried Trunks deeply, fearing what if the past will turn out even worse than the future he came from. Trunks finally made up his mind to teach Goku, Gohan, and Raditz, the only Saiyans on Earth, how to achieve the Super Saiyan transformation. He planned to spend a few days to teach them, then find a way to bring Vegeta to Earth so his existence won't be erased. Of course, if he knew that he did not simply travel back in time, but to a different timeline, he would not be so worried. Even if he returns in 3 years, he who had witnessed the strength of the androids did not have the confidence to take care of both number 17 and number 18 alone. But if they were able to bring in another Super Saiyan or two, the results would be different. Having made up his mind, Trunks brought Goku, Gohan, and Raditz to Northern Wasteland. I'll be teaching you guys how to transform into Super Saiyans. This is very important if you want to defeat the androids in 3 years. Trunks said. Super Saiyan? I heard the Jinyu Force said that the Super Saiyan of the legend is the only thing Frieza is afraid of. Gohan said excitedly. Haaewa. Trunks clenched his fists and gathered all his strength and yelled out. A shockwave blasted out, pushing the dust on the ground away from Trunks. His hair turned golden blonde and rose up with an appearance similar to a flame. His pupils also turned blue. But the most shocking was his ki turned enormous and oppressive to the trio. What an amazing ki level. Goku said and focused his eyes on Trunks. Wow! So strong. Gohan commented. So this is how a Super Saiyan feels. Raditz carefully sensed Trunks' ki properties and changes from before his transformation. Trunks' gentleness had disappeared, what replaced it was the aggressiveness that had appeared in his ki. The key point in transforming into a Super Saiyan is extreme anger and rage. But a sufficiently high ki level is also necessary. Trunks explained. The trio tried to transform into Super Saiyans while bursting out with all their energy and digging a large ditch under their feet. Haaewa. Goku looked really serious as he yelled out. After a while, he stopped and said, Ahahaha. I can't really get angry. Goku said while scratching the back of his head with a silly smile plastered on his face. Gohan tried hard too, but he also wasn't able to get so angry. Haaewa. Raditz exerted all his strength, the small ditch under him widened in size into a small crater. F***ck. This isn't working. I can't think of anything that can make me really mad. Raditz swore in his mind. After resting for a bit, Raditz tried to send all his power into the top of his spine, just right below his neck. But even after exhausting all his energy, Raditz did not feel the tingling sensation. I did guess so. I'm still too weak and don't have enough S-cells on my back to give me any feedback. Raditz sighed. He knew that once he had a sufficient amount of S-cells, it would be much easier to transform into a Super Saiyan by focusing all his power on the top of his spine. But for that to work, he needed a large amount of S-cells on his back. The orthodox way to transform into a Super Saiyan by relying on one's rage would excite all the S-cells in one's whole body, therefore having a much lower threshold of S-cells to perform the transformation. Though, the best plan was to increase his battle power so that more S-cells will be generated. Maybe because they had not had many enemies and had fewer bad experiences, even after a whole day passed, they did not manage to make any progress. Because they had learned everything they needed for the Super Saiyan transformation, they decided to stop training and wait for an opportunity to transform. After discussing a bit, the group decided to gather all their friends and tell them about the android's attack in 3 years. Trunks was still worried about his existence and asked Raditz about the possible places Vegeta might be. He's most likely still looking for suitable planets to live in and wiping out natives before selling the planets. If we want to find out Vegeta's exact whereabouts, we would need to hijack one of Frieza Force's bases and force one of the intelligence officers to trace Vegeta's scouter. Raditz shifted through his memories and said, "With a big insurance with me, I can take this chance to rob a few of Frieza Force's warehouses. Hey, I can even go fight it out with Frieza." Raditz smiled. What would be better than have a serious life and death battle with a big boss watching over him? He could totally take advantage of his Zenkai while fighting Frieza. Maybe because Elder Soma had purged half of Raditz's spirit's impurities, he was no longer as rash as before to simply rush to his own death and pit it out with Frieza all alone. Considering how arrogant Frieza is, there was a chance for Raditz to assassinate Frieza in his first form. But he was more worried about the consequences. If he failed, Frieza would go crazy and destroy Earth and kill him, destroying any chances for him to revive. And even if he succeeded in assassinating Frieza, what if King Cold came to destroy Earth for revenge? After a quick discussion, they decided to fly to planet Frieza 79, which was closest to Earth. Goku went to bring everyone over to his home. Instant transmission really came in handy. After a few minutes, everyone had gathered in Goku's home. Just how much has everyone improved? Goku's ki must be higher than Gohan's by at least 1-fold. Raditz was surprised that Goku wasn't all exhausted from performing so many teleportations. After everyone had gathered, Trunks had to warn everyone about the androids since Goku had forgotten most of the key information already. Can we really trust this guy that even hides his name? Yamcha was distrustful of Trunks. Tien Shinhan and Chiatsu were also suspicious of Trunks. Don't worry, he's telling the truth, Goku said. After Gohan and Raditz chipped in and convinced everyone, were they finally able to convince everyone? Though still reluctant, they finally believed that Trunks was from the future. Alright, 3 years from now, let's us meet up on an island 9 kilometers southwest of South City on May 12th at 9 o'clock in the morning, Piccolo said. They decided to meet up an hour before the androids arrive. Let me be clear. If anyone isn't confident, don't bother showing up. Our enemies this time will be on a whole other level. You'll just drag us down, Piccolo said sternly. Looks like Piccolo is really confident. For some reason. Raditz looked at Piccolo in surprise, wondering just where he got all that confidence from. The only thing I can think of is the trip to Planet Yardrat really benefited him the most since it suits his training style the most, Raditz thought. No one else meditated as much as Piccolo did. With the Yardratian's meditation techniques, Piccolo's training was several times more effective. Hee, don't look down on us. Yamcha looked confident. Hee. Krillin laughed as well. Ooh. They haven't experienced enough hardships. Raditz suddenly understood. Because they did not experience the Saiyan saga, with the lack of deaths and with them having trained under King Kai. It was no wonder they felt so confident after the sudden boost in their battle power. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.